Welcome, April. I'm super excited to chat on. We're just going to sort of see where this leads us around. You have a background in storytelling and speaking. Journalism is
Yeah.
your background, and I think we have a lot of similarities in what
Mhm.
I've done in the past because I have a performing arts background, and so I'm excited to see where we go with this and how you've used speaking in your own business as well. But before we get into all that, do you want to just give us a little background on who you are and what you do?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. Really happy to be here with you. I love the title of your podcast, by the way. Just love the name of it.
Oh,
Yeah, super
thanks.
fun. So,
Thanks.
yes, I'm April Pertuis, and I'm the founder of Light Beamers. As you mentioned, I have a background in storytelling. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm one of the weirdos who kind of figured out what she wanted to do early in life, and I've kind of stuck with it most of my life, all of my adult life, really. So. Um, my background is as a journalist, and I kind of came up through the ranks as first as a television reporter and anchor. I was a news broadcaster, later into television producing and script writing and a lot of video production. And all through that, it was really about people's stories. It was always about creating content that was very storytelling focused. And up until, really about 10 years ago, that's what I did and had done for a really long time, and had a super successful career and very fulfilling career doing that, both in the broadcasting space as well as the private sector space, and really working with brands and helping them with their digital storytelling and all of that. And then it just kind of got to a point where I was like, this is great. And I feel like there's more. There's just more that I could be doing with my knowledge at this point. I knew a lot about people's stories and how to extract those stories from people. And I was kind of just got into a space of curiosity of wondering, well, then what would kind of the next level of my own career look like? Not because I was unhappy or dissatisfied with it, but just felt like I had been doing it a long time and,
Yeah.
just, I don't know, kind of bored, if you will. And really went into a state of just prayer about that, and thinking. And really, this idea of Light Beamers was born at that time, which has morphed over the last 10 years. And we are celebrating our 10-year business anniversary this year. And over the course of those 10 years, it's evolved into a company where we help women tell their story. We help them, first of all, figure out the story and understand it, and then learn how to communicate it in the way that's going to be most effective for it to reach an audience, because the story isn't about telling every single detail.
Mhm.
And it's also understanding the point of the story. The story really isn't about us at that point, it is about our audience. And so we help them by writing books, getting on stages, doing a lot of speaking, launching podcasts, being guest on podcast, and really just learning to communicate better, putting storytelling at the forefront of it.
I love that. I also will return that compliment. The name Light Beamers is so cool. Where did that come from?
Yes, thank you.
Who
That
thought
was
it would feel that?
also, during that season where I was like, okay, what does it look like to go to the next level? I certainly didn't know the answer to that question at the time. And it was a state of just seeking and praying about it and just getting curious and imagining. And during that time, which was a window, like maybe 6, 7, 8 months, this was, I'm kind of thinking about it. And during that time, there was a real visceral thing that was starting to happen with me. And I was having an experience with the word light. And this sounds so weird. And I'm telling you, it was weird, but it really did happen. I would be reading a book and the word light would kind of jump off the page like in 3D. Or I would be journaling. I'm an avid journaler, and I always kind of journal and doodle a little bit before I go to bed, be journaling. And then, I mean, it's like somebody would take my pen and start writing the word light into my journal. Like, what does this word mean? And then I literally would have experiences where I would hear people speaking the word light into a room, and then nobody would be in the room. So I don't know if I was just
Oh,
tripping out
what?
or what was happening, but I began to take notice that I was like, maybe someone's trying to send me a message here. So I started really examining that word light. Okay, what is light, right? Well, light is really two things. It is something that we we have that illuminates the way. We can turn on a light and see into a room, or we can turn on a flashlight and it can illuminate the way. It is also the opposite of heavy. It is not heavy, it is light. It is easy to carry. At this time 10 years ago, I was looking at the landscape of our world, which a big part of that was social media. And I, coming from a news background and a storytelling background, I felt like a lot of the stories being shared on social media were the opposite of that, right? They were not illuminating the way, and they were heavy, they were dark. And I thought, man, I could do something about that. I could actually penetrate that. And I have a sunny disposition. I've kind of always been the Pollyanna in the group. And I just believe in positivity, and I believe in capability, and I believe, that there's a purpose to any pain or challenge that we have. And so that's where storytelling comes in. And I thought, man, that's a real space that I could enter and actually kind of put my flag in the ground and teach other people how to share their story with this idea of us becoming light beamers. We can beam this light out, and we can lighten the load when we do that. So that's really the origin story of the name light beamers and what it means.
I love that. I mean, you tell stories, so I should have known that you were going to have a proper story for that. But that's a great story.
Thank you. I mean, it's just true. That's how it evolved. And,
Yeah.
it wasn't, I actually don't even take credit for it. I don't even think it was my idea. I really don't. I really do feel that it was, you know, God just saying, look, girl, you're asking, and I'm telling you what I want you to go do. And this is it. And this is the word. And this is the path. And you're equipped. You have skill, you have knowledge, you have talent, you have all the things, you have education. But it's going to require you to do some things that are actually different than what you've been doing, and going to push you into your own uncomfort zone. And yes, it did all of those things. I had my own business at the time, but it was in a space that I felt really equipped and comfortable in. And this required me to reimagine a new business that I did not know how to do. And especially in the online space. I mean, at that point, I was on social media, connecting with old college friends and sharing pictures of my kids. And I was not using it as a business tool. I was simply using it the way that Zuckerberg probably originally created it for.
Yeah.
Literally, it was just, oh, I can connect with people that I've forgotten about. And it was like the lights got turned on once I started digging into, like, well, okay, if I do this, how am I going to do it? And how am I going to use social media? I don't really know that much about social media. And then I really started digging in. And I feel like it was like an iron curtain got pulled back, and it showed me all these people out there that are building these online businesses. And I was like, oh gosh, I have no idea how to do that. But I dug in and started figuring it out, and was a newbie. Sometimes I still feel like a newbie, but I was a true newbie in that space. And to be honest with you, storytelling did it for me. I was like, well, I don't really know how to do any of that. I don't know how to build an email list. I don't know how to do a Facebook ad. I don't know what a funnel is. I do not know marketing, but I do know storytelling. And I'm used to being visible because I came from a television background. So getting in front of a camera was not scary. So I just got on my channels and I started telling stories. And I encouraged other women along the way to allow my storytelling to prompt and help them excavate stories that they had inside of them. And from that, we started building community. So I started first, really before I had anything to monetize, I started building a community that we have to this day. It's the Light Beamers community on Facebook. A simple little, Facebook community that really took off and built my business. But it was really because of storytelling.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said. I also want to just sort of add as an anecdote is my word for 2025 was light. So
Oh, I love that.
when you
Yeah.
said, there's more than one meaning to the word light, like it's this, but it's the opposite of heavy. It's the opposite of dark. That's
Mhm.
that's why I chose it. And I was like, oh, I should drop this in. It's just sort of a fun fact.
Absolutely.
My word for the year. Yeah.
Such a great word.
I just love it as an intention. So I love
Yeah.
that that's what you sort of built your business around,
Yeah.
because I'm less about like I want a word of the year and more like what's my intention in
Sure.
this season. And that's it for me. In this season, I want to feel light. I want to feel
Mhm.
lighter. Anyway.
Yeah, and that's what I was desiring at that time. And I still desire it too
Mm,
to this day. But back when Light Beamers was coming to me and the ideas were forming and the seeking was happening and the prayers was like, gosh, like I've got a great career, but sometimes it feels heavy. And sometimes it feels like boring. And I just, there's gotta be an easier way for me to use what I have to make it mean something more than just I created some great digital contents for a business to be able to grow. Yay. But no, really, like it could have more meaning. And so that was really what I was seeking at the time too.
I love that. I feel like we could just keep talking about the context of that word. Like
Yeah,
there's so many
that.
great things that could come up. That word means a lot to me in a lot of different respects. So I could just keep going on like, well, it's also this and it's also that. But I want to call back to what you said around, when we tell stories, and I don't know if you said this or not, but even when they are about us, they're not about us.
Yep, correct.
It's always about your audience. And I
Mhm.
think that's, I was joking earlier with someone where we were talking about like on your website you have an about me page. Ironically, your about me page is not actually about you.
It's about them.
It's actually about your audience. So just sort of as a kicking off point, like what does that mean to you? How do you start to shape? Why are you telling stories
Yeah,
about yourself, not about yourself, about your business through like what you teach in your business, how you help people, but it's about your audience.
right. Yeah, great question. And it's really a great way to start when thinking, well, how do I tell my story? That which is a question I get all the time.
Yeah.
So when you make it first about your audience, you have to first, I always say the number one rule of storytelling is to know who you're talking to. You have to know who your audience is before you can select the appropriate story to tell. So it's not about how to tell the story. That's not the first question you should be asking. The first question you should be asking is, which story do I need to tell and why it's relevant to that particular audience? You have to know who that audience is because the story then, once you know who the audience is, it's going to inform you as to the correct story to share because the story is going to be about them and the story will be an illustration of a problem that they might be facing and how that problem can be solved, or a challenge or a question or a discovery that they're seeking. And again, it illuminates the way. That's what the story does. It illuminates the way, just like light. So the story is just a channel that you get to use the story to really reach that audience and say, here, this is how you do it, or here, this is what you're looking for, or here, this is the inspiration you need, or here, right? And so when you know who you're talking to, finding that story is so much easier. So that's, really the first part of it. Then, yeah, we got to get into, okay, well, how do we tell that story in a way that it continues to be about the audience and not about you? And that is a little bit harder for people because, well, I mean, it is our story, right? It's our lived experience. And it's really easy to get the story wrong. It's really easy to kind of let the details of the story run away with you and you get in the weeds. And now you're just telling the story and the story is all about you, right?
Yes.
So the how to tell the story, the way you're going to do that and ensure that you do it properly is always to remember who you're talking to, because you can kind of ask yourself, okay, like, do they need to know this detail or is this detail just for me? Right? If the detail's just for you, leave it out. That's not part of the story that you need to tell publicly. So there
Mm,
is a real fine art to how do you tell a story. And I could talk a lot longer on that topic, but for ease of implementation today, just remember who you're talking to, because what's in this for them? Why do they need to know that? You're only going to share the parts of the story that they can see themselves in, so that they are now attracted to you and they're buying into what you have to say. That's really important.
yeah. So you started by saying, like, first of all, which story are you telling? Do you, this is kind of a two-parter because I want to talk about, like, what do you mean when you say that? Are you talking about, like, I talk about you've got origin stories, you've got conversion stories, you've got case studies that are client stories. So, like, which type of story, or like which story from a part of your life are you telling about, the time that you learned how to ride a bike and you're now relating that to something in your business somehow, or, like a specific moment that you're telling. And then I love throwing the two-part questions at people and hoping you remember what I said is like, what does that mean to you to shape it to the audience that you're speaking with? Like, what does that look like? Are you just asking yourself, like, what has their experience been and how do you start to line that up?
Yeah.
Or
Okay. Yeah. I
that,
get it. Yeah. It's a great
picking up what I'm
question.
putting down with that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's start with the first one because actually, I love this because I think it's really easy for us to spout off things like origin stories and case studies and, conversion stories. And honestly, I don't think people really know what that means, to be
Yeah. I
honest, right?
agree. Yeah.
So let's just break it down. Let's like get rid of labels and just say, okay, what are stories? And this is really what we're always trying to help our clients find stories that made you feel something, stories that made you feel a certain way. Now let's just go through the gamut of feelings that could look like. It could be, stories that made you feel elated, stories that made you feel disappointed, stories that made you feel um, enlightened, stories that made you feel smart, stories that made you feel uh, like an idiot. I mean, right? Like we can go in all these different directions. And I imagine just in the short time I just said a few of those words, yeah, there might have been some things like, oh, I could probably find a story on the one of those really quick. Right. So I teach storytelling not from, oh, let's find the origin story or let's find the conversion story. Let's find a story where there's a lot of feeling behind it. And let's match those feelings to what you imagine your audience might be feeling. What do you think they could relate to? What might they be feeling in this moment? So I'll give just again to kind of the two-parter, right? Like what does this really look like?
Yeah.
And I think I attempted to do this yesterday on my channels because I'm currently writing a book right now. And for anyone that's ever written a book, published a book, thought about writing a book, I mean, it's hard. I'm not gonna lie. Like it's a challenge to sit and make yourself write the ideas down and to put it together in a way that's packageable product that you could put out into the market. But along with that, part of the challenge is the writing drums up a lot of things, like especially if you're putting storytelling into your writing, which I hope anyone that writes a book would infuse some storytelling. Otherwise, you've got a really boring book.
Yes.
So I'm digging deep right now into my own stories, and a lot of it is stuff that I'm like, okay, I can use this in the book. And then there's some other stories that are dumping out, and I'm remembering that have been really useful for my own recollection, and they're not going to go in the book. They're not, but they're stories. They're like these are good stories. Like they deserve the light of day because they made me feel a certain way. They probably make someone else feel a certain way too. So I've kind of been piling those away into a other writing folder because they're not really going into the book, but I know they could be used somewhere else. And so over the weekend, I decided, I'm just going to start recording some of these stories and putting them into some reels for social media. But like, let's use them. Let's use them in a purposeful way. Some of those would be stories that probably will never see the light of the day because I can't find a connection to that particular story that I have to why my audience would care. Why would it be useful for them? In that case, I choose not to tell that story. Does that mean that I'm not proud, don't have that story? No, I'm not discrediting it. I just don't find that it's very helpful and it wouldn't be something I would create content around. But I pulled out a story. This actually goes into some of the things that I know we'll talk about today around speaking. And I remembered a time when I actually gave a public address for the first time in my young career, even though I was in as a news journalist at that time, and I wasn't unaccustomed to speaking to the public, but it was the first time that I spoke to the public and I shared a really personal story. And it was when I was 26 years old and my grandmother died. And I wrote a piece because my own processing of her grief, because she was a very important person in my life, my own processing of that grief, I wrote what she meant to me, right? And I wrote it for me. It was just selfishly for me, my own processing, but I did share it with my family because I do that with my family. Anytime I write something, I usually share it with somebody. And I shared it with my family. This was the day before her funeral, and they begged me to share it as part of the eulogy at the funeral. one day before the funeral. And I'm like, okay, I will. Part, I think, oh, she can handle it. I'm the one that's out there on CBS News at the time, so surely I can speak in front of people, which technically I could. I actually knew how to do that part. But this was different because this was emotion, this was feeling, this was a whole lot of grief wrapped up into this, and I was like, man, I've never done anything like this before. And keep in mind, I'm 26 years old. But I showed up to the funeral, and I shared the poem and my thoughts on what she meant and how she impacted us. And how I got myself there was remembering that I didn't really care if I did it, like, if the poem was great or if people thought I was a good speaker. I didn't really care in that moment because all I cared about was honoring my grandmother. And I remembered that that's also what the audience cared about. That's why they were there. They weren't there to hear me speak. They were there to honor my grandmother. So I was able to make a really powerful connection writing this book, remembering the story, that, like, oh, that was a lesson I learned early on, thank goodness, about public speaking, which I do a lot of now, and I teach it to other people, is that um, public speaking isn't about performance. It's about our willingness to make an impact. And that was a lesson I learned from her, and not really from her, but from the experience of delivering a piece of eulogy at her funeral and sharing something so personal to me, and sharing that publicly to an audience that I knew that would connect with, right? So I took that story and shared it onto my channels because that's a lesson. Whether you're doing public speaking or not, it goes back to what I want people to learn about storytelling. And so I knew that that would help them see that in a different way. So that was a piece of storytelling that I could tell, which was a story myself, but I could use that in a really important, purposeful, targeted, specific way because I know who my audience is and I know that they will get that and they will, like, oh, that's really helpful. I'm probably thinking public speaking is so hard because I'm making it all about me and I'm thinking it's about performance and I got to get rid of all my ums and I have to be super polished and perfect and all those things. And you don't have to do any of that to be a great speaker. And so that was a piece of content that I was able to pull using storytelling and how I was able to make it connect to the audience. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. I, you know, I have a theater background, which we've talked about
Yeah.
elsewhere. Most people listening to this probably know that about me, from my audience
Yeah.
anyway. And it's interesting as you were talking through that. My grandma raised me, so I also delivered the eulogy at my grandma's
Mm.
funeral, and knowing that I was going to do that, I was like, I want to make it funny. Like, I know that
Mhm.
my uncle got up there and talked, and he couldn't get through it.
Yeah.
Someone else got up there and talked, they couldn't get through it, and I was like, I want to make it fun. My grandma was not a serious.
So she was funny.
She's fun, so just like she would call herself like old ornery. She was from Kentucky, and so like it was just a fun story. But I also have thought about telling, I'm going to connect these dots here in a second, telling a story around when my grandma died. I was hosting a playwriting festival, and she had been in hospice 20 times before that. Where you
Mm.
think, oh, it's hospice, it's the end. That's not actually true. You can
Mhm,
go into
mhm,
hospice and
mhm.
leave it and go back. It's more about just comfort care,
Yeah.
respite care in a way, which is a different thing, but anyway. And so it was sort of, I knew she turned 90 that week,
Mhm,
and I had an obligation. I had people from all over the world coming for a playwriting festival
mhm.
that I was hosting. And at the end of the weekend, that was I you have no you're running a playwriting festival, you have no extra time. At
No.
the end of it, I'm going to go. And in the middle of the night, in between it ended, I was there cleaning up my theater until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, got home, was going to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning. She died in between.
Mm.
That is a moment for me that, um, when I talk, like, I've done a lot with operations work and agency work, and what, like, is work important enough to miss big parts of your life? And I felt like that is my moment of, you can't get that.
Remembering that.
Yeah, you can't get that back. And
Yeah.
to connect the dots of like where I'm going with this is, one of the things that when I teach acting, you cannot pass your feelings off onto your audience.
Right.
You cannot put the emotional burden
On
of
them.
your story, whether it's, actors just tell stories, that's all they're doing.
Mhm.
if it's your story, if it's a story on stage from an actor, whatever it is, you cannot place the emotional burden of processing it through them. And that's just what you were talking about with, my grandma, and I wrote this poem and I got up and delivered it as eulogy. And I was going, how do you process through that, especially in that moment, especially at 26 years old.
God,
And now that you're going back and telling it again as an adult, and having
yeah,
lived a lot of life in between that, and having a lot of space and emotional distance, and still having her be such an important person to you, like where do you start to navigate? First of all, do you look at storytelling the same way, of like, how do you navigate the emotional side of
yes,
storytelling, and not placing, not processing it through your audience and the story that you're telling, but still being able to tell it in a way that's very impactful, where they will feel something that's not too heavy?
sure. Yeah, yeah, such a good question because that's a real issue that a lot of people
Yeah.
have to navigate, and especially if you're gonna tell a decent story, hopefully it's something that has something you feel something around.
Mhm.
And so, we could tell funny stories and happy stories, and those are probably easier. Even if we get into a laughing fit or something, it's okay. But it's different when we run the risk of being overcome ourselves with emotions and then leaving the audience to feel like they've got to hold that with you. And
Yes.
that's a big responsibility. And to your point, we should never do that. So one thing, and I going back to my example of being 26 and giving the eulogy, I will say that was not my best performance in that regard because I wasn't able to truly do that. I mean, I think looking back, I was able to do it to the best that I could at 26 years old and really not navigating personal storytelling to this degree. This
Yeah.
was really the first time I'd done anything like that. Um,
But it's also why they were there. Like when you said
but
they
again, I
weren't there.
exactly. I
Yeah.
knew if there was ever an appropriate time to cry while you're giving a public talk, it would probably
Yeah.
be at a funeral. So
Yeah.
it was okay. It was okay, and it wasn't a responsibility or burden that was being put on them in that case. I didn't have language about any of this back then, and to your point, that is why this story just came up again. It's not that I have forgotten that I've given that. I mean, I've used that about speaking. I've told about, I've spoken at funerals before. I've talked about that. But when I was writing the book and the story came up again, this was the first time I was able to go looking back, 30 years and go, oh, wow, look at what I learned at that experience. It's something I've
Mhm.
talked about over the years, but I wasn't able to attribute when did I first experience that? When did I first get the fact that speaking wasn't about me? It wasn't about my performance. Nobody could have cared less whether I did a good job or not. They cared about what I communicated. Now, it's nice if you do a good job, and we certainly want to, but it's really not the most important thing. It really is about what we're communicating and how we're using that to connect the audience to ourselves and to the moment and to the experience that we're all in the middle of, right? So,
Mhm.
I mean, I have perspective on it now. Could I have told the story I just told you today, 20 at 26? Oh, hell no. I just blubbered my way through that and got through it. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot in that experience, and now I can really see how experiencing that for the first time did teach it to me, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So there is the piece around the emotional part is I think it's important, and this is not my quote. I've heard Glennon Doyle say this, and I'm sure others have said it, so I don't know really who to give it to, but is that we don't tell the story from the wound, we tell it from the scar, right? Meaning we do need to give ourselves some time to heal and process through our stories before they become offerings that we can give other people. You actually do need to look at that story as a gift, and you don't need to give a messy gift, right? Like
Mhm.
unwrapped with like the tag still on it. We really want to process through the story. And as I describe storytelling, there's a piece of the story where there's the other side, right? And you really need to be on the other side of that story, like I am now. And I can look back 30 years and go, oh, there it was. That was the lesson that I learned. I could not have told you this story when I was 26 because I had no idea what lesson I was learning. But now I do, right? So I am telling the story today from the scar. Is it still tender? Do I still miss my grandmother? Am I just like so filled with emotion even now? Yes. But I can tell it in a very empowered way because I've gotten to the other side of that story, and I know that there's impact and reason why I would want to share this with an audience, and it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah. I could continue down that road because I think that's so interesting. But for the purposes of what we're here for and indulging emotional storytelling, I want to talk more about the how you've used speaking because you've had some pretty incredible results from speaking, arguably because you know how to tell stories well from stage, and it's such a great way to connect with people
Mhm.
through like you're all being in the room. If you've not been to in-person business events and connected with your colleagues in person in that way, like there's truly
Well,
nothing.
first of all, do that.
Do that. Yeah, do it. If
Right,
you
if you have
haven't
not
even
done
do it,
that, do
do it.
that.
Do it.
Yeah.
To sort of tee this up, you've added almost $100,000 of revenue within a year, I think, through speaking, and you've done that through what, 25. You wound up doing 25 talks in about a year. Is that correct? Am I getting the
Yeah.
details of this correct?
Yeah,
Correct?
yes, you are. It goes back to okay, fast forward, right, all these years
Yeah.
later, and now at Light Beamers and growing my business and all the thing and figuring out all the things that I've had to figure out, like I mentioned before, the email marketing and my funnels and Facebook ads. And all of those things are still just honestly, just not a lot of fun, to be honest with you. I just don't enjoy that part of it, but we do it because that's what we do as business owners. And they really just got to a point in my career and in my business where it's like we have a lot of options when it comes to marketing our business, right? And a lot of them are stuff that I do and have in place, but I really don't want to spend a whole lot of time. I don't want to become the expert in that. And I've looked at what my career has looked like. And again, speaking has been a big part of it. Over the years, I've done a lot of speaking, and I'm comfortable with speaking. But when I started building my business, I didn't realize how important speaking would become. And about, halfway through, so, 5, 6, 7 years in, I had had some more experiences of getting invited to come speak, come into this Facebook group and lead a workshop, come tell your story, come be on a podcast, right? There were a lot of examples where I was out there speaking and occasionally even get invited to like a real speaking engagement. But I was at a space where even though I was comfortable with speaking and even though I knew how to do it, I wasn't purposeful with it. I wasn't seeking it out. I was literally just sitting back and waiting for things to fall into my lap. And if someone invited me to come speak, I'd be like, sure, I'll come speak. But I knew, again, I was just kind of up against an upper limit. And I knew, like, okay, April, every time you go speak, some pretty cool stuff happens. Why aren't you doing more of that? You can spend your time figuring out email marketing or building a funnel, or you could go talk and you're really good at it. Like you love people. I love meeting, like to your point, I love going to events and meeting new people and all those things. So if I had a moment where I could be the one speaking, I should seek more of those out instead of just waiting for them to come to me. So this was actually about 3 years ago when this happened, and it's really informed everything that I've done in the last 3 years. So the story that you're referencing, I kind of made a deal with myself. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get serious about speaking. I'm going to be more intentional about it. And I'm actually I had a client at the time who had her own little challenge that she was doing with herself. She had hired me to help her write a new keynote talk, and we were working on that, but she was already out there speaking. This was not new to her. And so she's like, well, I'm doing 50 talks in 50 weeks. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, how are you doing that? And so she was kind of filling me in on what that looked like and some of them she was creating the opportunities for herself. And then others she was looking and seeking those out. But she had this goal. She's like 50 talks, 50 weeks. She had a tracker. She showed me all the things. And I'm like, you know what? That is genius because I mean, if you went and did 50 talks in 50 weeks, you would blow up your business in a good way.
That's a
And I'm
lot.
like, it's a lot. And so I was like, okay, I'm I'm all for the go for the gusto, but thought, okay, what if I did half that? What if I did 25 talks in 25 weeks? And so that felt a little bit, I could try that one on for size and not feel suffocated. So I'm like, okay, that one's doable for me. And it's a good challenge. I'm going to try that. It's going to help me with my goal of being more intentional, going out there and looking for the opportunities instead of waiting for them to come to me. And I can really focus on speaking as a mechanism to grow my business. I wasn't even necessarily seeking paid speaking engagements at this time. If they came, sure, absolutely, I'll negotiate. We'll get those opportunities, and I'll get paid. And those are great, but it wasn't my sole focus. My sole focus was, let's get 25 talks in 25 weeks. Well, I'm pretty much starting at ground zero because I had no talks on my calendar. And again, I didn't have anything in motion that was going to allow those talks to come in. So I actually had to hit the grindstone and work on what I call building my speaker flywheel. I had to get that flywheel moving. It was at a standstill. So I had to do a lot of intentional work around making ask and building out some speaker assets that will allow me to promote myself in a better way. I had years and years and years worth of video of me speaking, but I had no demo reel. I didn't ever put it together. So I'm like, I should probably do that. So I got really intentional about all the things that if you're going to be a speaker, those are things that are super helpful. So I worked that next, what I thought would be 25 weeks, was just roughly 6 months, right? I did not hit my goal in 25 weeks. So I kept going, right? Like, well, I've got to get to 25 talks. And so I did hit that goal in a year. It took me about a year to get that flywheel going, and I make enough asks to be able to get the opportunities to speak. And in my case, because I'm a podcaster, I've had my own podcast for a long time, and I was already out there, being on shows like yours. I mean, that's kind of a regular routine of mine. In my case, I did not count podcast as one of my 25 talks. They had to be more than that. That was just my criteria. With my clients, I tell them, like, if you're not already getting on podcast, let podcasts count. I mean, you get to make your own rules what this sounds like, right? So, but like my client with her 50 talks in 50 weeks, I loved how she was tracking it. So I kind of stole a play out of her playbook, and I built my own tracker so that I could really see what was working, what wasn't working. But most importantly, I tracked the dollars. So anytime that, even if I was going to speak for free, I could literally track and see, well, that was a person that I met at that speaking engagement, or as a result of that speaking engagement. And then that led to a follow-up conversation, or that led to an introduction. And that introduction, that person became a client, or whatever it was, right? It led to money. Not every time, but any time that it did, I just wrote it down on my tracker. Thought that was kind of an important metric to track. So I was tracking it. And I had my head down. I was just focused on getting these 25 talks. And I knew it was, I mean, my business was humming. Some things were happening, but it really wasn't until I kind of got to the end of the year and I was like, okay, it's time to, we should do some data collection and we should actually look at this. So I sat down and literally, started adding it up. It was in an Excel spreadsheet. So like do the formula, make math be math, and it adds up a total. And it was $97,800 that I had added in my revenue that year directly as a result of doing more speaking. And I went, oh my gosh. I actually did I actually got I don't trust in I'm not a math person. I'm not an Excel spreadsheet person. I literally got out my calculator and had to plug the numbers in again because I wanted to make sure that I had done the formula right in the spreadsheet because I don't really know how to do that stuff. I literally had to do it twice, and I'm like, that's a lot of money, like that's a business all by itself.
All by itself.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what everyone should be doing, because I mean, number one, it's a perfect platform for storytellers, right? To your point, like I'm comfortable telling stories and I enjoy that part. And so if, we have stories to tell, which we all do, and we're willing to get out there and look for the opportunities and stand in front of a room, and maybe you need some practice and you need some coaching around that, we can support you on that. But ultimately, if you're willing to do that, it's a very effective tool for growing your business. And I have now been doing that for the last 3 years. I continue to keep a tracker And I now have launched a program that's called the Speakeasy. That is that program. Like, it's basically everything that I did in that year, which was designed to do in 6 months. I documented everything that I did. And I'll just share you, there's really four main components of it. Number one, I built a talk. Like, there was a time where, again, people would invite me to speak, and I'd be like, sure, I'll come speak. But to be honest with you, I would show up and I would wing it,
Mm.
because I'm good at winging it. I'm a extemporaneous speaker. I can do that. And there was a part of me that was like, April, you're not challenging yourself. Like, you really need to write a proper keynote. You need to be prepared with it, and you need to start seeking those stages, because you're not even seeking those right now. And I'd had a couple of experiences being a keynote speaker, which at that time, of course, I did prepare a talk, but I didn't really have one written in that moment that I could just, if somebody asked me tomorrow to show up, I could show up. Right.
Yeah.
So I thought preparation is really the mark of a professional. And I am not prepared in this moment. So I'm not a professional. So, number one, we have to write a keynote talk. Whether you have one on your calendar to deliver, you have a booking or not, you should be prepared with one. And you should really put your ideas and your thought leadership down on paper into that keynote talk. And I had not done that. So that was step one. That's what I did. And then the second thing was, I practiced that sucker like I had a talk that weekend. I practiced it and practiced it and practiced it to where I was so good at delivering that talk. I was truly ready. The biggest reason why people aren't out there seeking, and I know, because I was that girl. The reason why I wasn't out there seeking opportunities to speak is because I wasn't ready. I'm like, well, I don't have a talk ready. I haven't practiced that talk. I don't want to go find those opportunities because I don't have that thing in place. So we're out there. People always ask me, how do you find more speaking engagements? And I'm like, anytime someone asks me that question, I tell them, you're asking the wrong question. You need to be asking, are you prepared and are you ready? And if you can say yes, then we can talk about how to find speaking engagements, because they're out there. Finding speaking engagements is actually the easiest thing in the world to do. It will take some focus and some dedication and some work, but they're out there. They're not mysterious. They are available.
Mm-hmm.
So getting the talk written and getting the talk practiced and prepared and feeling really good in my body. Like, I knew this talk. I knew I could deliver it. I was excited about it. Once I got excited about it, guess what I did? I started booking and speaking engagements. I started looking and finding the opportunities to speak. So I started adding the 25 talks to my tracker. I started with one, and then two, and then three, and I just kept going. And I just was relentless. I am not stopping this until I get to 25, because it's an experiment. I want to see what happens.
Yeah.
And then the fourth thing that I did was I learned how to monetize it. Right now, does that mean I got a speaking fee for every talk that I gave? No, I would love that, but that's not the truth. The truth is, I didn't monetize on the front end every single talk. But I just shared with you, I monetized on the back end. I was very, very clear with every talk that I gave, if I should say yes or no to that opportunity. I was seeking out the ones that I knew would be profitable on the back end. I knew I would be speaking to an audience that needed what I had. I knew that I could go in and share my thought leadership and my expertise in my stories, my vulnerable real stories, in such a way that would draw people to me, that would naturally lead to the conversations that it did in lead to, right? Which was the follow-up calls, the referrals, the appointments, the let me introduce you to so-and-sos. That's what led to $97,800. A few of those sprinkled in there were some speaking fees, but a majority of it was monetizing it on the back end. And so now that's what I teach in the program, because I needed it. And I think a lot of other people need it, because I don't really know of any business program that is really teaching us this aspect of it. That sure, we know speaking is super important. We can see the Tony Robbins and the Brene Browns out there, but they're doing it as a profession, right? I
Yeah.
really wanted to show people to add speaking as a marketing vehicle to your business, because that's what it did for me. And it literally blew the doors off my business and continues to. And it put me into doubling my income, essentially. And it continues to help me grow my income every single year. And now, of course, it's fun to get to teach this and help other people do the same.
It is very fun to teach speaking in that way.
Yeah.
I have so many questions off of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Go for it.
So, okay, so first of all, when you were building the talk, that was one of the questions I was going to ask initially that you sort of already answered was, did you give the same talk 25 times?
No, 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 no. And to be
Okay.
fair, not all of these talks were keynotes, right? But I wanted to be able to go after those keynote opportunities. And I knew I wasn't going after them because I didn't have a proper keynote built. So,
Can you just very quickly, like, what's the difference between a keynote and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
a very
yeah,
specific type of talk.
yeah. Okay, a keynote talk is I want you to imagine you're at a bigger event. It doesn't have to be big in terms of number of people, but just like an event where there is like a headliner, there's speakers there that you're going to learn from, and it's not a workshop. It's not a breakout session. It's not a master class. It's not any of those. It probably doesn't have a workbook. It's not any of those things. It's not a business presentation. All of those are valid speaking opportunities. And a lot of my $97,800 came from those as well. So it was definitely a mixed bag of more workshops, presentations, and keynotes. The workshops and presentations, man, I already had that in the bag. I was already successfully delivering those and doing those and getting asked to speak, but I still wasn't going out and trying to find as many of those as I could. So I was looking for more of those, along with pushing myself to look for more of the keynote talks. So the keynote talk was a talk that I built to be around between 30 and 45 minutes long, because depending on then what the actual opportunity is, I have been asked to deliver talks that are an hour long, and I've been asked to deliver 90-minute talks. I've also been, so from my 30 to 45-minute talk, I already had the base, so I could add a little bit more when I needed to fill more time. On the opposite end of that, if I have a 30-minute talk and they've given you 20 minutes to speak, you can trim a few things and still fit that talk into the time requirements, right? So a keynote talk is going to be pretty structured, and it's going to have some talking points that allow the audience to, because again, why are we doing this? It's all about the audience. So definitely something the audience can take away from you. You want to leave your audience leaving a keynote talk going, wow, that was so good. That talk was so amazing. It really got me thinking, really, I love how she said this or that. Like, you want to build those things in there so that ideally that's the reaction that they have. They're walking away feeling like they've really learned something new or got new insight or have a takeaway that they hadn't thought about before. And so we want to build a talk that's very strategic and does that. At the same time, in my world, we want to build a talk that's very storytelling focused. I didn't want to memorize a talk, and I didn't want to feel like I was giving a TEDx talk where I was, like I have to stand on a red dot. And I love TEDx, so I'm not knocking that. But in this case, I wanted to explore like sharing more of my story and letting the story be the thing that I could use to teach the audience the things I wanted them to teach, and be the framework that I use so that I don't have to memorize the talk. Because memorizing a talk scared the pee out of me, and it still does. I actually don't want to do that. I just don't feel like it feels organic. And what if there's all these what ifs, and I feel like that's what stops a lot of people from embracing public speaking, because they have a view of what they think public speaking is, and they think you have to memorize, and they think you have to stand on a red dot, and they think it has to be this really tight thing, and it doesn't. And so it's really just a beautiful opportunity to go and serve your face off to an audience and use it as a huge connection point and a power play to be able to bring that audience to you. And we're going to do that through storytelling for sure. So it's very structured. It's you understand that you're not there, like it's not a workshop, it's not a session. It's literally you're on the stage, you have your thoughts, you have your ideas, and you're delivering it to them in a way that can have a dramatic impact.
Yeah. How often are you recycling stories, recycling your talking points, recycling, if you have like a framework that you sort of work out work out of how much of the talk, like even if it's not the same talk, how much of it is recycled versus new content or crafted based on the audience that you're specifically addressing?
Yeah. I think that because I'm generally speaking to similar audiences, I don't have vast difference. Now, I have a talk coming up that is not my normal audience, and I'll tell you about that one in a minute. But just in general, I am usually speaking to like entrepreneurs, like you do, service based entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, leaders. Sometimes in the corporate space, I really don't seek that out as much, although I'm open, I'm definitely open to it, and I have. But people that are in this in like sales and things like that. So with that, I can recycle a lot because it's kind of the same stuff that I need to share in many different ways. And so I might change up the story a little bit. I might change up a particular teaching point that's going to be really specific to their industry. If I know I'm speaking to a mixed crowd of men and women versus just women, I might change up the story, or change the key talking point. But I do have kind of a
Kind of a
rotation now of like three or
three or
four
four.
talks that I can deliver and that I can use over and over again, which is the idea. Cause like you're not really going to spend a ton of time writing new talks. I mean, that's not the idea of this, right?
Yeah.
But you want to get some that are in your back pocket that you can use and then tweak accordingly. Now, I do have this talk coming up that is an audience that I am building a brand new talk for. And it is not an audience that I normally speak to. And I am going back to my college and I am speaking. I was part of a sorority and I'm speaking. The national chain sorority it's their 130th anniversary this year. And so my chapter of the sorority is doing a huge reunion gathering. And it's a 2.5 day event. It's one keynote speaker and I'm it. And I am speaking to women that are not my ideal audience at all. Now, some of them would be, but that's not the point of why they've asked me there. Obviously, they've asked me there because I'm an alumni. They are, they follow my work. They thought that I could speak on the stories of our chapter. And so I'm building a talk that is very geared towards that. I will probably never give that talk again. It's very unlikely. And so every once in a while, you're going to have one of those pop up. But obviously, that's a huge passion project of mine. It has a lot of reasons why I said yes. I was super honored. It's probably not a talk that I will necessarily recycle verbatim. But even with that, because I have all these other talks, I am going to be able to pull things that are going to make building that talk a lot easier. You're starting from scratch, but you're never always starting from scratch.
Yeah. That's when I love what you said about, you're tweaking. Because I mean, I think that's smart to say, especially if you have a goal of like, I want to give 25 talks,
Yeah.
25 completely different
No,
talks
that'd be
with all
crazy.
different, you'd be,
Yeah,
that's
I built
enough.
like one workshop that I wanted to deliver on repeat. I did a couple of master classes that I could interchange in between depending on the audience. I have those. I still have those, right? I can deliver those anytime. So I have those built. And so the same was true for the keynotes. Well, I also need to have keynotes ready to go. So I went and built those as well. Yeah.
Here's a more nuanced question around that specifically. How much did you change the title, if at all, based on the specific event or audience, or did the title change at all, or
Yeah,
did the way you pitch it
I
was
think
was
the way you pitch it is always a little different again because you have to be so focused on who you're talking to and you want to position that pitch and that talk in a way that they're going to hopefully say yes. But the actual talk title, I don't really think matters, to be honest. I think it matters in the pitching. I think it matters in the promoting of it. And like, it's got to get their attention and all those things. But once I get those talks, could I use the same title over and over again? Sure, absolutely. And I know I have, because it's really at that point more about the meat of the talk and how that's going to be more tailored to that audience and less about whether or not I change the title or not.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
I want to go back to where you dropped a term that I've never heard before, and I'm interested when you
Ooh.
said speaker flywheel.
Oh, okay.
What that sounds delightful. What
Oh,
is
yeah. Okay.
sounds like
Well,
an amusement park ride.
right. Yeah. If you think about, like a hamster wheel, flywheel, like it's
Mhm.
if you get on the hamster gets on the wheel and standing at 0 miles per hour, you've got to start walking on it. The hamster's got to push it to get it going. But eventually, once the hamster does that enough times, the flywheel just starts running and it doesn't need the feet, pushing on it any longer. So that take that image and think about when you first go embark on like, okay, I'm going to be more intentional with my speaking and I'm going to I'm going to get myself out there. I have to go get on the flywheel and I've got to go press my feet forward, right? I've got to go make some ask. I've got to go get some bookings. I've got to build that talk. I've got to practice it. All those things are part of that flywheel. It's not just the speaking engagements because, again, you're not even going to go ask for the speaking engagements unless you feel ready. So we got to get you ready. So that's part of the speaker flywheel. And then now, like what happens with our myself and my clients is like once you've done that and you've been making enough ask and you've been putting enough stuff out there, eventually you can let your foot off the gas and it's kind of like cruise control. Now, it won't stay like that forever because eventually you're going to deliver all the speaking engagements that were part of that flywheel's action. So what's important is once we get the speaker flywheel up and running is we have a system, and this is what we do in Speakeasy. We have a system in place that allows you to come back in every once in a while and just give it a few taps, right? We're going to give it a few taps and make sure it continues to hum. So I do this by using my tracker. I look at my tracker and I go, okay, great. I've got some stuff going. This is great, right? But I then also need to make myself a note. Okay, in about another month, it's going to be a good time to come in and hit it again. I need to like spend a couple of days doing some
Doing
some
some
generation,
generation
speaker generation and things like
things
that.
like that.
I now do
I'm
this as part of my regular routine. I'm doing that kind of on a weekly to 2 weekly basis, every 2 week basis, as I'm going in and like, ooh, let me go send something here. Ooh, let me touch out to this person. Here's the other really cool about having a tracker. Now I've been tracking for 3 years. Well, the flywheel gets so much easier because now I'm going back to places that I haven't spoken to in a couple of years. And I'm like, hey, remember me? That was such a fun thing we did. You want to do that again? Or hey, what do you got going on? You want me to come speak again? Now I've got relationships with people that are making that flywheel run a lot easier. But in the
Yeah.
beginning, if you're starting from ground zero, and that's where I was, because I was just sitting around waiting for people to come to me, you have to get that flywheel going. And so we really focus on helping you do that because, ultimately it gets to run with a lot of not a lot less effort.
Yeah, but the talk comes first. Talk
I
first.
find that's my opinion. Other people might do it differently. I don't know that I would put the hustle into it if I felt uncomfortable not knowing what I would be talking about. I don't really know how you sell something you haven't created.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think it needs to be at least a part of the way fleshed out. If you don't have
Yeah,
word for word,
right,
you know.
right,
But
exactly.
yeah, I feel like I could just keep talking about this and want to be respectful of time. I would love to know, sort of to wrap this up, if you look back on that wild time of your life where you did 25 talks in the course
That's
of
a
a year,
lot. It was
even though
a
you did
lot.
not meet your goal, that's still kind of extraordinary. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
Well,
Like,
and
what
that's important for people to hear. I did set this goal of 25 talks in 25 weeks. I did not hit that goal. I did not get that done in 25 weeks. It took me 50 plus weeks to get that done. But you know what? It still had the same effect.
yeah.
And, I don't recommend 25 talks in 25 years. I do recommend, like, let's focus on it and get it into a period of time where you're actually going to benefit from the ROI of that. But I also want to be real that, like, to get this off the ground, it took me a minute. It really did. It took me a minute.
I'm gonna pause my question that I was going to ask real quick to say, how much were you traveling in the space of that year to do those 25 talks? How local were the things that you were
A
looking at?
lot of it was online. There was
Oh, a
some
lot of it was
local.
online.
A lot
Got
of it
it.
was online. There was some local. There was one big talk that I did that was paid. That was with our local chamber of commerce, and I got to do It was for their women's event, for 350 women. And I was the closing keynote speaker. There were 2 keynote speakers that day, and I was one of them. And that was phenomenal. I'm like, yeah, this is so awesome. And it's in my backyard. And it was the talk that I had built. It was like I was ready. And it was a talk I asked for. I went and pitched myself for that.
Yeah.
And so that was great. Others were, I did a little bit of traveling, but that's fun, like when you're doing something that you now are really excited about, the travel, you still get to say yes or no. You get to kind of dictate if you're going to do that or not.
Yeah. Okay. That seems much more manageable. I was like, that's so much travel. It's
Yeah.
such a, I would
And
love it.
again,
I
I
think
want
that
to
sounds
remind everybody, these were not all keynotes. Some of this was workshops. Some of this were master classes, and those are really readily available online.
so going back to having done that, having done 25 talks in the space of a year, what would you say your biggest takeaways from that experience would be?
Um, Gosh, there's a lot. Let me narrow it down.
I was going to give you a number. Like if you had to pick the top, let's say top 3.
Yeah. Well, my number one takeaway from that experience is that speaking really works. I mean, speaking is a workhorse for you in your business, and it will require you to work it. It's just not press a button and let it go. It's not like a Facebook ad. You can just turn it on and let it do its thing. It's not like that. It really is something you're going to have to work. And as I've just described, you're going to have to get it off the ground. But to me, that was a fun challenge. To me, it was purposeful and I was intentional and I was doing it for a personal challenge. I wanted to push myself to be a better speaker than what I had been prior. I wanted to push myself to get different opportunities than the ones that were naturally falling in my lap. I wanted to see how far I could take it. I wanted to see how much I could charge. I wanted to see what would unfold. Um, so those were all really personal growth aspects of the challenge for me, which was another big takeaway. It really did push me to grow in areas that were uncomfortable, and you always win when you do that, And so that was a big piece of a takeaway. Is it was a huge personal growth opportunity, and it was lovely. It did require work and it required intention, but I eagerly did that, and it was something that blew me away. Like I really did not. I mean, I thought I would add some dollars, sure, but I never imagined that would be $100,000 experiment. And it
Yeah.
was. And it continues to be. And it wasn't a one trick pony. I mean, every time I go speak, these things happen. I have a graphic that I share a lot of times that talks about the domino effect of speaking. And I can just, kind of give you an image of it. Like if you imagine dominoes, right? When you go and speak, a lot of dominoes start to fall. And some of these will fall in the favor of adding revenue to your business. And some of them may not look like money at first, but they can become money down the road. But every time you go speak, you're going to, number one, you're going to add new followers, new people to your social media. You're going to, if you do it right, which is, we want to help you with that, making sure you have all these pieces in place, but you can add people to your email list. There's usually always something that I share in a talk that would allow people to get on my email list voluntarily. And so we can add to your email list. You will meet new people. You will develop relationships with those who are bringing you on board. And again, those are people you'll be able to go back to year after year, or every couple of years and get speaking engagements again. You will get direct clients out of it. I literally have had people come up to me after a talk and hand me their card and say, I want to book a call with you and I want to hire you. And I literally have left the building sometimes with people already signed up into a program. I've not gone into it going, oh, I'm going to go find a bunch of clients, but just naturally. And again, with a strategically put together talk. I mean, I'm not just up there telling stories for the fun of it. I've put together a talk in the way that I ideally it will become a conversion event, right? It will move the audience into action. It will make the audience want to take action with me and with light beamers. And so naturally, I have that kind of baked into my talk. But that happens, So sometimes it is a direct, wow, I just made extra money from this talk because now I have a new client, or I have a meeting booked, or I got this cool referral. Or another domino that can fall is, oh, you got another talk booked. I can't tell you how many times I finish a talk and then someone's like, will you come do that for my audience? Will you come give that talk to my people? I've got an event coming up. We want you as a speaker. Like, I didn't even have to ask for that one. Right. So these are the dominoes that start to fall. And that was another big, big takeaway, that because I could see it all across the board on all the talks that I gave that year and the ones that I continue to do. It happens every time.
Yeah, I would say every single person I know who uses speaking in their business, even when they were not using it super intentionally, where it just sort of like happened,
Yeah.
like, wow, the doors that it opened.
That's why I did this,
Yeah,
because I was that person, like, I was kind of like lazily being a speaker, like, oh, sure, I'll go speak, but every time I would, something would happen. I'm like, why am I not doing this more intentionally? Like,
yeah,
why am I banging my head up a wall around trying to figure out how to market my business when I could just go speak?
yeah.
Like, I don't know. I just like, to
I,
me, it just made so much sense. It was literally point A to point B, straight line, easy,
yeah,
don't deter from the path and just do it.
yeah. I love that. It's put me on stage, give me a microphone.
Heck
I'm never
yeah.
happier.
Yeah. It's so much fun. You meet so many great people, and you get
Uh,
connected, you build great collaborations. I mean, there's just so many things that come out of it that, doors will open that you just cannot imagine. I I could tell you story after story of just crazy stuff that's happened. They're like, I don't even know how I got in this room, but here I am, and here we go. It's been wild.
that is the beauty of events. Um, it's sort of to wrap all this up. Is there anything we've covered? We've gone over all over the world with this. Is there anything that
It's
we
been
have
so
not
fun. I feel like we've talked about everything. It's been so
that
good.
anything we did not cover that you feel is important
Oh
to
goodness.
say around this that we didn't get to?
Yeah. Well, I'll just try to put a bow in it. And at the end of the day, really, at the end of the day, speaking, and we could go like really deep down that hole, but and I love it clearly. But if it's not speaking, right? Which hopefully we've made a good case for why you should do it. But if it's not for you, if speaking isn't the path, what I would say that I hope you get out of this conversation is a realization that your story holds power, that your story has significance. I know there's a lot of people that's like, I don't really know that I have a story, or I don't really know that my story could be that. Like, I don't know if that my story could, be important enough to share. And if that is you, I want you to hear me say that I literally, I have interviewed over 10,000 people in my career in the last 30 plus years that I've been doing this work. And I have never, ever, 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 ever walked away from an interview and meeting someone and finding out more about their story and said under my breath, well, that was a complete waste of my time. Never.
Never. Everyone has a
Ever.
yeah.
Everyone has a story, and there's real power and purpose in that story, and that story has value and merit and weight. And so maybe it's writing in a book one day, maybe it's sitting down for over coffee and sharing that story with a friend, maybe it's sharing the story at a support group, maybe it's sharing the story inside of a Facebook group with all your entrepreneur friends, maybe it is speaking on stage, maybe it's starting a podcast, maybe it's going out and being a guest on a podcast, maybe it's recording a reel and telling the story of your grandmother like I did yesterday and putting that out on your social media. There's a place for it. And so if nothing else, I want people to hear that, because I really know and believe in the power of storytelling, and it can actually be one of the biggest gifts that you could give yourself, is to go on the journey of learning to tell your story.
Oh, I love that. Well, that's a perfect segue into if someone wants help in telling their story and
Mhm.
maybe potentially getting on stages for themselves or writing a book or whatever shape that might take for them based on their energy and their personality and all the things, where can they find you? How can you help?
Yes. Lots of places, right? I'll give the ones I think are the most helpful. One is probably our own podcast. Just if you want to kind of binge and listen to more of where this came from, right? There's lots of episodes on our podcast called The Inside Story with April Pertuis, and we've been podcasting for 4 years, so we've got over 200 episodes that you can listen to, both of other women that are sharing their story and doing really powerful things for encouragement and inspiration, as well as the solo episodes where we're teaching a little bit more and trying to help you with those things. I mentioned our Lightbeamers community on Facebook, which is where all of this started all those years ago. we still run that community, and we do prompts in there every week. It's a free community to join, and we do prompts where we prompt you with storytelling prompts, and we invite you into that community and that safe environment to practice your storytelling with us. It's super fun, and it's always really fun to see what other stories people are coming up with and putting into the group. So that's a great way to do it. And then we have some free resources that we can share with you on our website, lightbeamers.com. And then just connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Those are my three main channels that I'm really active on. And you can find me at Lightbeamers on any of those. You can email me, April at Lightbeamers. I'm really love to just connect with people and start up a conversation. And then if one of those free resources doesn't do the trick, then I could point you in the next direction. Then on our
Amazing.
website, of course, we have information about our speakeasy.
Yeah, amazing. Well, we'll link everything in the show notes too, so that it's easy. This was fun to talk about. I love speaking. I love stories. So this was fun to go all over with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Super fun. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely.